Hi there. Have you been confused by all the information that is available about nutrition? Have you ever thought to yourself, I want to be healthy, but I don't know how in this crazy world? If so, you're in the right place to learn everything you need to know about how you can be your healthiest self by improving your digestion. We'll learn how to make the easiest and healthiest sourdough bread to the truth about yeast and sugar. Join me each week and we'll talk about everything from junk food to your protein needs. We will even dive into some unspoken topics like, what is my bowel movement trying to tell me? Or how can my emotions possibly affect my digestion? For more information on how to be your healthiest self, visit us on healthyselfwithfood.com, where we provide resources including recipes, cooking classes, and coaching appointments. I believe to completely take care of your whole self, that it includes what you put on your body. So I'm very happy to introduce you to our amazing sponsor, Gervine Family Farms, where you can find the best smelling soaps and healing body products on the market. Gervine Family Farms is the home of all natural, real soap and body products that truly heal your skin. Do you regret washing your hands because after you do, your skin is dry and irritated? If so, try the healthiest soap on earth. It is made from coconut oil, essential oil for the smell, and herbs or spices for the soap color. All the ingredients are so healthy for your skin that you could eat them, but please don't eat the soap. It doesn't taste good. There are no fillers, synthetic dyes, fragrances, or low-quality oils. Real soap doesn't strip your skin of all your body's natural oils, thus requiring you to use lotion so that your skin doesn't completely dry out. Save money on lotion by using real soap, and you will never be able to go back to your fake beauty bars that you call soap. Find us at GervineFamilyFarms.com. That is GURVINE FamilyFarms.com.
Thanks for joining me today. I thought it would be fun to tell you my life story. I will abbreviate, of course, and not drag this out for hours, but my goal with it was maybe for you to learn something that might parallel to your life or something that could help you in the future or with someone that you know. So I will dive into the story about who is Kaisa. Well, first of all, I'm the oldest in my family with 5 other siblings, and I have a twin fraternal brother. I grew up with parents that gave me a great experience with food. My dad is an amazing cook that made us many ethnic meals. My mom can bake anything, and we always had fresh baked cookies, bread, and pizza dough. I didn't experience a traditional casserole or frozen food until I left home. We didn't have any soda or candy in our home. And I don't remember going to the doctor as a child. I don't remember even being sick that often, but childhood fevers and flu did happen. My mom took care of us naturally, so we didn't have to take antibiotics that I remember. And my mom had some of my siblings at home with a midwife, and she used herbs to support her experiences that she was going through. I contribute my love and desire to find perfect health to my experiences growing up. Once I left home at 18, I considered myself a pretty healthy person. But food still made a difference in my life. In my healing process, which I hadn't started at that point, and it also in creating damage, which I learned about later in my life through my experiences and my studying. So when I left home, I didn't know how to cook perfectly, but I had some background and a desire to learn more. So I had been on a continual journey since then to create food that feels amazing in my tummy. Having children introduced many complications with hormones, iron levels, and later calcium depletion. I birthed my children with a midwife, which was a good experience. They did a good job watching all my nutrient levels over the years. I didn't enjoy drinking milk growing up, so I didn't ever drink it. Um, so after 4 childbirths, they decided it would be good to test my calcium levels. So I said, okay. And it turns out they were low, and they sent me for a bone density scan at 29 years old, which revealed I had osteopenia in my back. And this is the early stages of osteoporosis. My body build, my body structure being kind of small boned, leads to the possibility of osteoporosis. And I definitely didn't want to have that. So I was willing to do whatever it took to look at that closer so that I could hopefully reverse it or change it before I got older when it would be a problem. So I was sent to an endocrinologist who put me on high doses of calcium, which unfortunately caused me to pass a kidney stone a few months later. And that kidney stone was more painful than giving birth naturally without drugs, which I had done 4 times up to this point. The midwife suggested that I do weight resistant training, and they sent me to an endocrinologist who gave me strontium, which is a bone building component, since calcium up to that point wasn't working. In other words, I wasn't absorbing it properly. It wasn't going to my bones and doing the things it needed to do. It turns out that I wasn't absorbing the calcium because, well, I'll get to the because in a minute, but it showed up as candida in my body. And candida causes malabsorption. So it wasn't just calcium that I wasn't absorbing. There was other things too. And I found out about this about the same time that my dad had the disorder hemochromatosis. And I carried one of the mutated genes for this disorder. Or I should say I still have it. And you have to have both of the mutated genes to have the disorder. So I didn't have the disorder, which would mean high levels of iron in my body to the point where often they will damage someone's liver over time. And it can cause other problems. So as a result of this one gene, I did demonstrate high iron levels in my blood, but I didn't necessarily have any liver damage. So up to that point, this high iron didn't manifest because between all the pregnancies I had and then nursing babies, my iron levels looked normal. And at times, they even thought that I was low in iron. They would try to put me on different stuff for my iron levels when they tested it, like maybe during pregnancy or right before or after. And I'm able to manage my iron levels now. Well, not now, but I've always been able to manage my iron levels because I am female, and I have a menstrual cycle each month that flushes out the extra blood, and it requires my body to build new cells. And so this actually solves the problem of hemochromatosis if someone has that. And so thankfully, I don't have that, but I also am able to stay balanced because of this fabulous thing that we all have that happens to us, even though at the time of menstruating, we don't always think that it's fabulous. So needless to say, the weight resistance specifically targeted at my back and the strontium that I was taking did reverse my osteopenia. I took a 9-year break from having children for my health. And later, when I was pregnant with my 6th child, I discovered that my knees were hurting and that I actually had osteoarthritis in my knees. And although I had grown up playing soccer and being active, there wasn't really any good reason why I would have the beginnings of arthritis in my knees at, again, a fairly young age. So I did physical therapy strengthening, and I took glucosamine, which is supposed to help in aiding your joints. And so I was doing that for the healing process. And my knees didn't truly feel better until later in my health journey when we were introduced to taking a food sensitivity test with our new naturopathic doctor, which I will go to into details in a moment. So when I avoided the foods that were listed on this test that caused me inflammation, my knees have never hurt again. So like I went through the process of them hurting and doing physical therapy and even doing some other treatments in hopes that it would help my knees. And down the road, the thing that actually helped it was changing what I ate, because the inflammation that was being caused from foods, and not necessarily bad foods, because remember, I've always been a health nut, but that doesn't mean I was eating the right foods for my body. So it was causing inflammation and it was going straight to my knees. My husband and I are avid soccer players still now, and we have been since childhood. In fact, we met in college playing soccer, and he's had two knee surgeries due to hard contact, as well as two nose surgeries from elbows to the nose. He's actually had another knee surgery just recently, but it was to redo the original knee surgery that had, um, I don't want to say faded or broke, but over time they have to be redone. The cadaver ligament didn't last longer than 15 years, which is typical. Anyways, so back to my story earlier, when I was having children and they were young, I suffered from a terrible case of thrush on me and in my baby's mouth when trying to breastfeed. And at the time, I didn't understand anything that was going on, but it was terrible. Um, I worked through it so I could nurse each of my four children, sick. Well, we'll get to that in the story. But at this time, the first of the four children to a year old, which I thought was which was my goal. My goal was to breastfeed him as long as possible. But it was very painful. So despite how painful it was, I made it to a year with each of them. And in the process, they wanted to give me diflucan, which is supposed to be a one-time medication to kill all the yeast. And for me, it didn't work. They gave me more than the one dose, and it still didn't work. And they wanted to give me a third dose, and I thought, this is silly. If the first dose didn't work and the second dose didn't work, why am I going to take a third dose? Knowing that it was kind of one of those things that, kind of like an antibiotic in the sense that it was going to kill all the bad bacteria, but in the process kill all your good bacteria too. And I honestly think that it just kept killing my good bacteria because I couldn't shake it. So at this point, I had to request to not take it anymore, even though that was the only solution that they had. And I didn't have the same problem with baby number 5 and 6, which weren't yet at this point. But I believe that was because I had started on a self-prescribed Candida cleanse and healed my gut before getting pregnant with number 5 and number 6. And this was back before Candida was a well-recognized cause of issues. One doctor even told me that there was no such thing. And shortly after that, I returned to school, which I did quite a few times throughout my marriage, because that's a long story, but I wasn't quite done with school when I got married. And so I often wanted to return to school, and often it was just to study more about things that would help me and my family, was my real drive. But when I returned this first time, and I was taking as many nutrition classes as I could, in my writing class, we had to do a final research paper, and I did it on Candida. So I had to do a whole bunch of research on it. And so I learned a lot from my research, and I believed it helped me in my situation greatly at the time. So I was really grateful for that. And when I was in college for the first time in the 90s, they didn't have the degree I was interested in, which would be what I would call nutrition. I later found out if I wanted to return to school, I could study to be a dietitian, which would help people in hospitals who've been diagnosed with things like diabetes, or maybe they want to lose weight for their health, or a nutritionist, which is the science side of testing food in labs. And neither one of those was what I was passionate about. So I chose not to return to school for that degree, even though I'd found out all the information. And I was still early enough in my journey that like my classes hadn't expired and whatnot. But anyways, so I just kept doing my own studying and testing out healthy recipes and, trying to find the answers for myself. And this looked different for me once I found a great naturopathic doctor. And he tested our whole family for food sensitivities. And I was the one that was really, really interested in having this done. But of course, once I did it and learned about it, I wanted to do it for my kids. And then, of course, I would want to do it for my husband. But it took a little time. It's a process. Up to this point, I'd been dealing with a lot of health issues with my kids at young ages. My oldest had 7 reoccurring positive strep throat tests that resulted in his pediatrician prescribing many different antibiotics and then recommending, after all that, that he just have his tonsils removed. My next oldest child was having migraines and skin sensitivities to soap products at a young age. The doctor wanted to prescribe her a strong sedative for the migraines. I said no, and instead we tested her for allergies, and she ended up having a sugar and wheat allergy. So instead of giving her a sedative, I was able to kind of get to the bottom of why she was having the migraines and skin sensitivities. By removing sugar and wheat out of her diet, her headaches stopped. This was tough, though, because she was preschool age when this all started, and everyone in school believes in rewarding children with sugar. My third child had terrible allergies, and when we found an allergist specialist, it was determined that he had allergy-induced asthma. So they were really concerned about the asthma, but it's because of the allergies were causing it. So if we could control his allergies, he wouldn't have any asthma symptoms. They determined he was the most allergic to grass. And we had grass in our backyard, and all our kids played soccer on grass, at the parks and whatnot. After trying the prescribed inhalers for him, I noticed he wasn't growing taller. He started gaining weight. And I did some research and discovered that the allergy and asthma inhalers that he was on were high in steroids. And he was demonstrating classic signs of steroid abuse at age 8. So I took him to a pediatric endocrinologist who basically told me I needed to feed him healthier, which was a joke. They didn't draw any blood to test any of his hormone levels. I was very disappointed since I knew there was something off, but none of the doctors could tell me what was happening to him. In fact, some of the doctors didn't even believe there was anything wrong with him. But I knew my child. I knew how he had been and how all of a sudden he changed. At 3 years old, he had had an ENT surgery, which I believe possibly caused this next set of health issues that he had. The asthma and the allergies and all that. Anyways, I took him off the steroids that was in the inhalers, and I agreed to allergy shots instead because they didn't have any steroids in them. So it was just a dose of what he was allergic to so his body could fight it off naturally. And that seemed to work really well as far as controlling his allergies. He didn't have any issues with the shots or with having allergies at that point. And at some point, we just phased him out of it. Like, they didn't really say, oh, he's done now or he's going to be okay. It's like I had to make all of these decisions growing up, not me growing up, but for them growing up. And I did the best that I could. And so when we found the new naturopathic doctor, and he's the one that did the sensitivity test for our family, he tested my son's hormone levels, finally someone that would do blood work, and he found that he had no testosterone and his growth hormones were stunted, just like I thought. So what I believe happened was the steroids caused his testosterone to be suppressed, and that is what then caused the weight gain and stunted his growth because he literally was not growing up. He was only growing out. And so this doctor gave him DHEA to boost his testosterone naturally, as well as giving him a dose of HGH, which is human growth hormone, which is something we all have in us, so it's very natural. It's like the HCG that they give adults, which is they'll do it in conjunction with adults that maybe want to lose weight, and they'll do it by resetting their metabolism by taking a dose of this. And usually they want to lose a lot of weight, and they'll do it when they're eating super low calories and for a short amount of time, and then they'll couple it with the HCG drops. So my son just did the drops, but he didn't change anything to his diet. He didn't eat less, he didn't eat more, he just kept doing what he was doing. And as far as calories, because he's a teenager and he needed all of the, calories because he was active, And he lost all of the extra weight that he had gained from the steroids, and he grew 6 inches in that short amount of time that we did that treatment. And that's all that we did. And it fixed the problem because the doctor was willing to look at where his hormone levels were, because nobody would have guessed that a kid would have something like that. But based on, the things he had gone through, it makes sense now looking back. Well, since this treatment was done before puberty, this naturopathic doctor, we believe, may have prevented him from being sterile later in life, because that would have been affected. And he followed his food sensitivity test, no dairy, no gluten, and maintained his newfound lighter weight with no problems. Well, I believe his body was damaged by the 6 months of steroid use, and he suffers with weight gain now as an adult. I would say when he doesn't eat right, but I don't know that that's necessarily the case either. And of course, I don't have all of the answers and know why it is, but he definitely was affected by something that doctors felt like was the only way. And I sadly don't think it was the only way. But again, I did the best that I could at the time. And now I want to learn more. And so that other people don't get stuck in the same cycle. My number 4 child had a lot of extra energy from a very young age. That's just who he was. So when he was 14 months old, he was playing outside in the backyard and thought it would be a good idea to pick up a baby rattlesnake and that had slithered into our backyard from a nearby field. Well, thank goodness for his older brother who was outside with him and knew what happened so he could tell us. Otherwise, we would have thought he was crying for no reason. So he basically saved his life because we were able to call an ambulance and take him to the local hospital that specializes in snake bites. And I went with him in the ambulance on the gurney because he was so young, so I had to hold him. And he was treated with many vials, 30 to be exact, of antivenom, which is very expensive, and that's a lot of doses. And they said it was because it was a baby rattlesnake, so he needed more doses to even out the venom. He actually had a miraculous recovery. It's a great story all in its own. And he had no surgery or physical therapy needed. And at the beginning, they speculated that he would either be allergic to venom if he ever encountered a snake again, or he would be immune. And I'm sure they're still speculating that because it's not something I personally want to test out. So we made him promise that he wouldn't become a snake wrangler or go and play with snakes. He, however, has grown up to be an adventurous young man who was never afraid of getting hurt, still to this time. And it was almost like it really didn't hurt him to do things that would hurt anybody else. He has a few scars from like burns where his skin was melted, and he fought with cactus often and didn't win, and so he'd have cactus stuck in him, and he didn't cry like I think it would have hurt me. And I had the joy of removing these cactuses from his skin. He stapled his thumb, and he was okay with me taking a picture before we removed it. These are just to name a few of the battle wounds he had. So that's kind of a fun story. But we've survived these young years with my kids. But I always wondered, could we have been healthier? I was doing everything I knew at the time, and yet I still had health bumps with my pregnancies, with the deliveries, with the babies, and as they grew older too. How could I be so out of balance when I was the healthiest person that I knew? So, on to a little side note, my husband had health issues he dealt with during our first 18 years of marriage. Heartburn, constipation, hemorrhoids, gut issues, and terrible seasonal allergies. He suffered with 2 knee injuries and damage to his nose that resulted in multiple corrective surgeries. And this was all from playing competitive soccer. Needless to say that he had pain from all of these issues he was dealing with until we decided to be tested for our food sensitivities. We had tried everything. We had all the different medicines and, it turns out that he had so much inflammation from eating the wrong foods for his body type that he was now suffering from leaky gut syndrome, which is kind of like the end of the path when, your body's kind of giving up on trying to fix all the things that are going on inside. Leaky gut, it means that the stomach lining has been exposed to inflammation for so long that it thins it out And now it's allowing food particles to leak out of the stomach and into the the bloodstream where the food doesn't belong. So you know what your stomach kind of looks like inside of your body when you've looked at a picture of anatomy, and it's there like a sack to hold the food in because it's not supposed to just be flowing through your body into your bloodstream. So when this happens, your body recognizes those food particles as foreign objects. And so many autoimmune diseases, this is a similar situation. Um, he just had the reaction as far as inflammation from like everything that he ate. And so it just was, it's like it compounds and it just keeps getting worse and worse until you do something about it. And there's no medicine for this and there's no surgery for this. And so this is like the thing of our era, right? And there is a solution for it. So thank goodness he let me um, take care of him, just temporarily. I said, let me just try some things out. And he was willing to get the test, the food sensitivity test. He was the last one in our family. And when he got his test back, I had already started working with the new naturopath doctor in the office as a nutritional counselor. And so I knew how to read the test and how to feed him to correct what was going on. So he agreed to allow me to change how I fed him for 30 days. And I think he thought that he could do anything for 30 days, but then after that, he would go back to eating ice cream every night out of the container and drinking his Powerade, which I called poison, at work all day. And to be fair, he worked outside and it was really hot most of the year. And so he definitely needed something. But his blood work reacted to almost all 96 foods on the initial test. Now, there's multiple food sensitivity tests, but the first one is the one that has 96 foods that are generally the most reactive for the general population. And so we cut out all dairy, gluten, eggs, oats, corn, sugar, and there was much more. We ate a lot of brown rice because he couldn't have white rice, and that was okay. Brown rice worked out just fine. We ate beans, meats, salads, and vegetables. And this is when I invented the burrito bowl for our family. That way he could enjoy the flavors of, what would be in a burrito without having the tortilla or chips and the cheese. And because often that's the thing that makes people say, well, what's the point? I can't have it. And so we found a way around this at the time. So if you add some guacamole and seasoned beans or meat or both with the rice, lettuce, salsa if you can have it, and corn, cucumbers, you have a hearty meal that is out of the box. It's not traditional, but it's delicious. And I have made some creative meals for breakfast since at the time he couldn't have eggs or oatmeal, which are like the two go-tos. So we made a lot of breakfast potatoes and we started adding veggies to this dish like zucchini, onions, peppers, and spinach or kale. Those were all good. And needless to say, he stuck to his new way of eating, even avoiding dairy ice cream for 30 days. And he felt so good after 30 days that he said I could keep feeding him this new way of eating forever. I don't know if he used the word forever, but he's like, we can just keep eating this way. And I was so excited. At the time, he lost 15 pounds of water weight, which he's a pretty lean guy to begin with. So you'd be surprised, but he could tell the difference. His fingers were not inflamed and hurt. He didn't have the inflammation in his knees or any of his other joints, in his face. It was amazing. But it was all water weight. And that's a classic sign of inflammation, which he had a lot of inflammation inside of him. And, it only takes time for it to start manifesting outwardly too. His workouts were exposing his muscles in his abs and his arms, which I had to put that in there because that was like his most exciting thing. He would always show us like, look at my abs, look at my arms. And like they were always there, but because he didn't have that inflammation, he's like, I have my high school abs back. But he slept better. He stopped grinding his teeth at night. His gut felt amazing and he didn't have constant bloating and gas. No more heartburn or constipation. And the most amazing part was he got off his seasonal allergy medicine that he was on year-round for the last 20 years. We actually, as a family, all did this step together as far as getting off the allergy medicine. And although weaning off a medication that you have been taking for years is hard to do for the first few days, I can tell you from experience. I was on it as well. It was completely worth it now. Like after the fact, if you can get through that week, because you suffer from all the symptoms that you have, but without taking the medicine to suppress them, and you're letting your body naturally treat them, and then you don't have them anymore. And so our body can now deal with the occasional seasonal allergy appropriately, and the symptoms don't last. It's just, it comes on, maybe if it's grass or they're cutting hay or it's dust or whatever it is, you're exposed to it, you kind of, sneeze, do your thing, but then it's over because the body is doing what it's supposed to do and it's not getting constantly inflamed from it. And now, since our bodies have less inflammation, it has allowed our immune system to treat these occasional threats with no problem. I really like homeopathic medications on a little bit of a side note here. So now we will use homeopathic allergy medicine, and that really does the trick for a quick little outbreak, but it's nothing like it was before. And so rather than the constant inflammation not allowing our body to have the ability to fix us, we now are letting our body do its job. But it takes steps, right, to get that inflammation out of there. So the naturopath was impressed with the results of our family's food sensitivity test, as well as me helping them work through it and treating them and the differences it made in all of their health. And he attributed them to me feeding them for their body types, which then resulted in him asking me to work in his office to help his patients who were on the same health journey. And so I agreed to it and enjoyed doing nutritional counseling and learning from this doctor until he moved out of state. Everyone in my family was happier with their health results. Now, this did make it hard for going to parties, eating out, being with other people when food was involved. It really did. But I still wouldn't go back. Not having stomach pain every time I ate a treat out anywhere outside of my home just became too bearable for me. The pain, it just wasn't worth it. And I suffered from some severe skin issues. This is ironic because it was even after my food sensitivity test results, which I was following faithfully, but I only had a few items to avoid. And they were like sesame, crab, yeast, cranberry, not like terrible things, pretty easy. And the funny story about these particular items is that I was taking supplements that included 3 out of 4 of the ingredients in them. So I had, I was taking something with sesame in it, something with cranberry, yeast, anyways. And so by once I was aware of what was causing inflammation in me, what I was sensitive to, I was able to cut out those supplements super easy. And therefore, I was able to avoid having those effects. And then I could also avoid them in the food category as well. And I healed very quickly. Well, and that was mostly like my stomach stuff, but my skin didn't heal. And so the doctor did a second food sensitivity test for herbs and spices. And so, like I said earlier, there are more than one food sensitivity test, but often they don't need to be administered because if someone has the results they need after doing the first one and following it, then they're good to go. But in my case, I was one of those exceptional cases, which, I'm grateful for now because I've learned a lot from it and I'm able to, share that with others, where if you're doing what you're supposed to do on the first one and it's not working, it means there's something else. So once he administered the herbs and spices test, this was the jackpot. This is why I was still having digestive issues even after cutting the items I knew about out. Turns out my highest triggers for inflammation were vanilla, pepper, paprika, and parsley. So those are some of the herbs and spices that are on that herbs and spice test. And they were pretty high. And so it turns out my highest triggers for inflammation are those, not dairy, gluten, eggs, that are some of the typical ones, which is interesting, right? Now, these are not easy spices to avoid as they're in a lot of prepared foods. And now I know why every time I ate a baked good anywhere, store or homemade, it hurt my stomach. And I always thought it was the sugar, but it turns out it was the vanilla that was in it. But now that I know what was triggering my reactions, I could avoid them. and my skin healed within a week. And I'm telling you, I had sores on my hands and ankles that were so raw and not healing that the doctor at one point suspected diabetes because they weren't healing. That's kind of a sign of that. And before that, he thought it was an infection. He thought that, for sure I had like some sort of a, yeast or some sort of a bacterial infection on my skin. So thank goodness he went with his gut and he tested me for the food sensitivities rather than diabetes. And I've never had these sores again. It was just in that moment of my life. And I'm sure at this point, with all the work that I've done, I could probably even figure out, what type of emotions or not necessarily trauma, like bad trauma, but just like experiences that we were going through that may have even triggered this kind of thing. And all the inflammation that was in my knees, remember the osteoarthritis that I thought was from my last pregnancy? It went away after I removed these food items from my diet. My knee pain before that had gotten so bad that when physical therapy didn't work, I went into my naturopathic office that I was working in, and the doctor said he would do prolotherapy. I don't know if you know what prolotherapy is, and as many people swear by it. And it's them, they take a needle and they inject sugar water into the area that is maybe tight, not working, pulled, like whatever it is, and it causes it to inflame, which then your body heals it from the inflammation. It was so painful. It was the most painful treatment I ever had, almost as bad as passing the kidney stone. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that again. But if you told me that by changing my diet I would fix it, I would have done it. I would have done it years ago. So I was so grateful. So for me, that's why I'm so committed to what I do for myself, because I've seen the results. Not everybody always has the same results to where they can see it. Anyways, so that's just part of my story. I was like sold. So I stick to it. So when my last son out of the first 4 kids was 9 years old, my husband and I decided that we needed some more girls in our family because we had the 3 boys and 1 girl, and we decided to have 2 more girls. And before that, I needed a break from being pregnant. I felt so I could get healthier, so I could get my body healed. And honestly, my son, my number 4 son, he was so active. It gave me the time to catch up with him. Anyways, that's another day's story. But the last 2 girls were 2 and they were about 2.5 years apart from each other. When the oldest was 3.5 and the youngest was 1 year old, they developed severe rashes. The youngest was just weaned from breastfeeding, and we had started her on baby food. And she liked everything we gave her except for peaches. And we thought the rash was from dairy that was bothering her. So we thought, okay, well, we'll put her on like almond milk. That kind of was like the buzz milk at the time, like the replacement milk. And we would see if that would help. And in the meantime, the doctor drew both of their blood to do a food sensitivity test. We're kind of backtracking in the story because I know I already started talking about food sensitivity tests, but this is when the test happened. Oh, the doctor said our youngest was the youngest patient he had ever tested. And it turns out there were many things that the girls shouldn't be eating. And by removing these foods, their rash finally went away. We had used creams and all the other things we had tried before we changed what they ate didn't fix the problem. And the funny story about these 2 girls is that their highest food trigger on the test was almonds, and the youngest couldn't have peaches. So the girls were so young that they had tried to tell us that certain foods were bothering them, but they didn't know how to properly describe it. So they would say things like, it hurts my teeth, or it itches my tongue. That was my 3.5-year-old. That's what she said when she would eat pineapple. And it turns out that the test revealed she couldn't have pineapple. Her body couldn't handle it. And so at a very young age, her body was reacting to it. So their bodies knew what didn't work for them, and it was speaking loudly. And the funny thing about this is that I kind of feel like because of where I was at when I was pregnant with them, may have passed on some of this kind of stuff. That's something that we don't necessarily know for 100%, but it just makes sense, like the whole DNA and And so it's not to like blame or to do anything like that, but it just kind of connects the dots, because like I said, I took a break to get healthier, which I did. I built up my blood supplies, I built up my iron levels, I built up all my vitamins and minerals so that I knew when I would get pregnant again, with these last two, that, I would be healthy, because not only was I older by that time, but I knew what it took for me to be pregnant, and what it took out of me. And I knew that I inadvertently gave it all to my babies. And so for a mom to be left with anything, we got to make sure that our supplies are really high, and so that we're not affected by it later. So one last story for my youngest. She actually had a UTI at 4 months old, and it turned into a kidney infection. And without going into all the details of that, and another fascinating story, because these are the only two stories where I ended up in the hospital with my children. Um, and unfortunately, in the hospital, she was given broad spectrum antibiotics, even though I was completely against it. And I told them no. I told them just wait a little bit longer. Um, and I wanted to wait for the bacteria culture to come back, which didn't take that long. I don't know why they couldn't wait another hour. She already waited a whole week. Um, and that way it would be a very specific antibiotic for what she was fighting. And I'm a fan of that. Like, that makes a lot of sense. But nope, they gave her the broad spectrum antibiotics. And I was afraid of it killing all her good bacteria in her gut with the general antibiotic use, which would affect me and being able to nurse her. And it would cause another yeast infection outbreak in her mouth, and therefore on me. We dealt with that. I won't go into all the details, but that was, an experience that we had, dealing with hospitals and infections. And our next daughter, shortly after that, got strep throat, and the pediatrician wanted to give her antibiotics. And this was before I found the naturopath, and because I know he would have done something different. And I was worried she would react to it because of her food sensitivities. Just there was things that she was sensitive to, and based on my research, that can affect you with the type of antibiotics that they give you. And they didn't seem to think that there would be any problems or any connection. They didn't think there was a link to her sensitivities. Well, she ended up getting hives from the treatment, which is an inflammatory reaction, and it indicated that she did react to them like I thought she would. So we didn't even finish the treatment because it was affecting her, and we stopped it and soothed her hives with lavender essential oil and a cold compress. And I did call the naturopath for this one because, the other doctor I felt like was hurting my daughter, and he was able to kind of help me through soothing her and her getting past the strep. It was no problem. And once she had healed from the hives, her throat was better as well. And this is when I decided to do all homeopathic treatments for my family. And I learned a lot about this in the naturopathic office, because that's what naturopaths use, is homeopathics. And this way, there are no harmful side effects. And we've had good results from using allergy, sinus, headache, or even pain versions of homeopathic drops or the dissolving tabs. And I can say that I have no more health issues to report from our family once I made this change. Not everyone will have things that they can eat, but most patients cannot eat, like from the food sensitivity test. But most of the patients I've worked with that they've taken this test have at least reacted to one thing. And so there's usually something going on that's kind of like pinpointing, but there's also like the emotional side of things, which we'll go to into a moment. But knowing what this item is that affects your body can make a world of difference by avoiding it, so that you lower your inflammation levels, because your body can only handle so much inflammation. And then your body can work on healing and repairing injuries or illnesses rather than constantly reacting to avoidable inflammation. When we have enough inflammation for an extended period of time, we can't feel our body talking to us. My husband remembers as a child feeling an upset stomach when he would drink cow's milk, but he was supposed to be a good kid and drink his milk, so he would. Then the stomach pain and gas would come, so he would lay on the cold floor to help relieve the pain. Over time, he stopped feeling this way. In other words, stopped feeling the gas and pain, because he was so inflamed from continued exposure, because he continued to drink the milk, that he stopped feeling his body talking to him. His highest reaction on his food test when he took it was dairy and sugar. And his favorite food was ice cream. So the combination of the two in ice cream was the biggest inflammation spike for him. So he changed to eating dairy-free ice cream occasionally, and he feels amazing. Inflammation is the root of all disease. Knowing more about what is going on inside of your body can be the key to gaining back your health. Looking inside my body was the one thing that I could never do myself. I called myself a health nut because I would do anything I could my whole life to avoid sugars, colors, dyes, preservatives. And I learned about the different kinds of fats and oils so I could have the best on hand for my family. I made as many things as I could from scratch so I could use organic whole grains. I wanted to control the food that went in our body so that I knew it was the best we could get. And still with all that, all that I did, we encountered health bumps along the way. I think the biggest thing I've learned in my journey is that there is not one thing you do to fix yourself or to become healthy. It's a whole package that works together. And when all the pieces are balanced, you feel true balance. So my particular package looks like this. Number one, first I did blood work to reveal what my body was dealing with. At the time, it was hemochromatosis, which is the high iron in my blood that's not absorbed, and therefore calcium was not being absorbed properly either. The solution, weight resistance training, turned my low calcium levels around, which was my osteopenia, so that I didn't develop a full-blown osteoporosis at the young age of 29. I learned what foods had more calcium in them than cow's milk, so that I didn't have to revert to drinking cow's milk if it wasn't something that I enjoyed. And so then I ate more of the foods that had calcium in them, things like bok choy and spinach. And then I was retested a year later for the bone density test, and I was healed. My percentages went all the way up. Then the Candida test came back positive, and I learned what this was. It's a yeast imbalance in the gut, and I learned how to heal it through food. I avoided sugar and went gluten-free. My gut felt so much better, but this wasn't the one answer. It was only one part of my puzzle. I needed to learn why this was out of balance, and I believe the answer is inflammation. Once inflammation was under control, I have not suffered from Candida again. And I didn't have obvious signs of inflammation, I would say, besides the osteopenia and the osteoarthritis. Those are both inflammatory type things. But I think sometimes people are looking for something to be really obvious when it comes to inflammation, like joints or like swollen, like their body being swollen, but that's not always the case. Anyways, the next step in my puzzle was headaches, skin issues, gut imbalance, and discomfort when eating certain foods. So I found a doctor that did food sensitivity and food allergy testing. I learned what the test was revealing, inflammation, and how avoiding these foods would make all the difference to my symptoms that were caused from the inflammation. I discovered homeopathic remedies, and these work with the body with a small dose of a plant from nature, a food or an herb, to encourage the body to heal itself. It is like a boost of nature for a specific issue that you're dealing with, and there are no side effects. And I went to this because of all of the experiences we had with other types of pharmaceutical medicines that did have side effects, and especially after what happened with my son, and I feel like I could have done something different had I known more at the time. The sixth step to my puzzle was that I removed all pharmaceuticals from our home. The allergy medicine and the Tylenol and the Advil, they were all causing inflammation rather than healing it. And we found other options for the symptoms that we would have used these items for in the past. And the natural remedies never work as long and are not as powerful as pharmaceuticals, so sometimes people get disappointed by that, but they do work. It takes time to get used to waiting for our body to do the work that it knows how to do if we aren't in the way and we aren't slowing it down. We aren't slowing down our body's reactions with lab-created drugs. And then I started using essential oils. As I learned more about nutrition and what an important role herbs and spices have in our diet, I couldn't ignore essential oils. They are a concentrated amount of an herb, spice, or food that has healing properties in high doses. We used oregano oil to rid our children of warts. It is not as fast as burning off a wart, but it does work if you give it enough time. And then I even went as far as using the essential oils in the soaps that I now make. So from the time that I discovered this, with our sensitive skin and all the other things we had, it made sense for me to make our own soap because I wasn't able to find any at the store that met the criteria I was looking for, that it had, minimal amount of ingredients, and that any ingredients it had were meant for the soap and not for preservatives or colors or dyes or scents. So I wanted that to be a natural form. And so I used essential oils. And so the 10 scent soaps that I make for Gervine Family Farms I use essential oils only in them for the scent. They also have medicinal values for your body. And with our skin being our biggest organ, and the thing that tends to show us if there's something going on inside of our gut, I felt like this was a smart choice for our family. And then other family members or friends or whatnot enjoyed the soap as well. And so we decided to sell it so that we'd have a way of sharing it with others. So you can see from using my journey, my health journey, as an example, that we have many layers to our physical body that need to be addressed and healed in different ways to get ourselves to a balanced state. It matters what we put on our skin, all body products, how we sleep, and how well we even eliminate. And I enjoy using better quality products and listening to my body so I know what it needs. It took time to look at my spiritual, mental, social, emotional, and physical state to get to a balanced state. And I'll tell you, the first step was for me and my husband to look inward. We were introduced to the Landmark Forum, which guides you through this process of looking inward. It's not an easy process to look at who you truly are and what makes you tick and why we do the things we do. But once we were able to understand human operations and communication, we could accept certain things about ourselves and change things about ourselves that we didn't want to hold on to anymore. This was the first step into communicating with each other about the things that we wanted in life. What makes you happy? What are your goals? What do you want to achieve? What kind of a difference in this world do you want to make? We learned about clearing trapped emotions and trauma and breaking down our heart walls that are built from a very young age and we don't even realize they are there. This is when I found health and life coaching. This was a piece I was missing to connect better with the patients I worked with in the doctor's office. Then I found spiritual and soul purpose coaching, and this was the piece I was missing from my life. And now I have learned these principles and I want to share them with others. I believe the emotional work is what we all need to move forward and to prepare our body for accepting the physical changes we may need to make. I've learned even more about this through studying Dharma. And Dharma is like your soul's purpose. And most people have heard of karma, but it's not the same thing, but it is from the same ethnicity or belief system. And so instead of being something that comes back around, karma, it's going to come back to get you. But Dharma is what your soul's purpose is, what you were created for, who you are. And often we lose sight of that. And now the Ayurveda practices, which are all about our body, how our body operates and how to bring it into balance for perfect health. And so that's what I'm currently doing. I offer on my website, healthyselfwithfood.com, health and life and soul purpose and spiritual coaching, which is just, I use all those principles when I'm working with someone, but then the Ayurveda practices really help us dive into who you are, how you're made up, your physical body, your digestive type, and your personality types or your emotions. And we're all wired differently in all three of those areas. It's what makes us unique. But when we understand how the body works, which is what I have learned through my digestive studies with Ayurveda, I can really look at who someone is and how their body wants to be operating. And typically, we have run into so many things that have blocked us and stopped us or diverted us in our lives just because of maybe where we lived, or what the weather was like, or the type of job that we had to have, or things that affected us in childhood, even, being at a new school, the friends that we made, things that people said to you, the belief system that you created at a young age about either what a family should look like, or what you wanted, what your goals were like. Some people really want to get married, and other people are like, no way. And these things are developed at a young age to where we have a belief system around each one of those principles. And it doesn't have to be the same for us, but it's good to discover what that is about ourselves so that we can clearly choose to be that person that we are demonstrating, the person that we are being. And if it goes against who we truly are, then there's usually some sort of friction or resistance that makes it so that we don't feel complete. So really what all of this is a question about is, do you feel whole and complete? Whether it means physically, in your health, you feel like you are who you are supposed to be. You feel no pain, you feel freedom, you feel the energy, all the things that come with the physical. Then when it comes to our emotional, or our, what I had called earlier, our personality, but our emotional state, do you feel complete? Do you feel happy? Even though there's times that we're going to feel different emotions, like, obviously, like if someone passes away, you're going to feel sadness, but it's not something that necessarily has to stay with you for a long time, that everyday operations, you're just not fulfilled. You're just not happy. You don't feel like you are the person that you know that you could be. But we haven't been taught up to this point how to look at who we could be, and do I even deserve that? And do I even have the time to look at that? So there's a lot of things that stop us. So I have been lucky enough to find this work through my health studies and journey, and found that it is actually a really big piece of us being our healthiest self. And I love sharing it with others. I am grateful that I've come across some really amazing doctors over the years that have helped me and my family, but have also taught me and allowed me to learn the things that could propel me forward. And then recently I've found things either online or in a new location or a new place, and I've learned different angles and different principles and things, and putting it all together in a way that can really help others. So I'm working on creating a digestive course that can help people go through these steps to solve these problems for themselves, similar to kind of how I went through steps. Obviously I would probably do it a little bit different if I had the knowledge I have now then, but going through those steps for each person's own digestive journey individually, as well as writing a handbook that would outline these things so that people have it to refer to, so that they can always be helping themselves, because it's a continual journey, and then also helping their family and friends and loved ones. So thanks for joining me today and listening while I told my story. Just thought it'd be good to get it out there. Sometimes people think that when someone is in a certain state of mind or physical state, that they've always been there, and don't realize that there are things that we all suffer from or have experienced. It makes us who we are, and everybody's stories are amazing. I love hearing people's stories and working with them on really looking at what they want and how they can achieve that. And so I look forward to hopefully someday working with every single one of you in one form or fashion. Just the fact that you're even listening to the podcast is a way that you can learn and grow and become the person that you are, that you can rediscover yourselves. Take care.
To be your healthiest self, join me each week as we talk about a new topic that can help you, your family, and your loved ones in your life to be your healthiest self.